Welcome everybody. I'm Judy Tuttle from Tuttle Up Stamping. I'm an independent Stampin' Up demonstrator in Midland, Texas, and I'm happy to be with you here today. We're doing something new today. I'm starting a new series every Thursday afternoon called Tuttle's Thursday Tips, okay? And the reason why I'm doing this is just recently, lots of people in my life, demonstrators, not demonstrators, customers, have said to me, new customers especially, I wish you did weekly videos just to show us the basics, the things that we need to know about inks and adhesives and how to put stamps on blocks and how to add the sticker to the stamp and all of those kinds of things. And I decided enough people had asked me about that I would go ahead and start a series on Thursday called Tuttle's Thursday Tips. And today's video is going to be all about, let me make sure I've got you over here on my computer screen so that we can interact together and I can answer your questions as they come up. I'm really excited about this. This is something I've thought about doing for a while. Hi, Chelsea. Thanks for coming. Now, if some of you have been stamping for 30 years, this information may bore you. It may be stuff you already know, but there are a lot of people out there that are new to stamping that don't have all the answers to all these questions. So hopefully I can help those people figure out all the things, all the answers to their questions they need to know. If you are someone out there that wants to know how to do a certain technique, or you want to know when to use this adhesive or that adhesive, or you want to know when to use this paper or that paper, just PM me or email me a message and I would be happy to answer those questions for you. Hi, Melissa. I'm glad. Good, Melissa. I'm glad you liked it. So Melissa is one of the people that said, I could use some tips on some things. So I'm glad you're here, Melissa, and that you caught me live. Okay, so I'm going to talk today about our inks. The inks that we have through Stampin' Up that I use the most often, and try to give you some tips and tricks on when to use those inks and how to use those inks, okay? So if you give me just a second, I'm going to turn my camera down and around and flip it over for us. So if you get dizzy, just close your eyes for just a second. And I've kind of got my camera up high today. There we go. Maybe it doesn't need to be quite that. There we go. So that you can see my hands and kind of see what I'm talking about today as I go along, okay? So the first thing is our ink pads. These are our basic colored ink pads. They are a dye ink. They are water-based. They are beautiful. They have a label on the top to show you what color it is with the name and all of that. And when you get your ink in the mail, it will come shrink wrapped in plastic like this, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna just cut open the shrink wrap. There we go. And that is gonna help you get to the ink inside, okay? Now, something that some of my customers didn't know for a long time, as you can see, let me pull one of them here. I put the color label here on the side so that when I store my ink pad flat, and they should be stored horizontally like this, you don't want to store them sideways or this way in a box or something like that. They need to be stored horizontally, and I'll talk about that in just a second. If you're storing them on a shelf, you would not see this label on top, right? So what Stampin' Up has done is that we have these on the back side, and one of my customers had no idea that these were ever there. They had no idea what this was for. But these labels are specifically for labeling the sides and the insides, if you want, of your ink pad, so you have more views of what color you're using. So what I do is I take this very edge of this sticky label and I just pull the whole thing off right like that. And then you can see that you have the ink color in several different languages. Japanese, maybe. French for sure. German is in there. So these are the different colors in different languages. Okay, so what I pull is this very first top one right here is English. And I'm going to pull that off. And if you turn your ink pad to where this notch is, that's what I call the front of the ink pad, okay? So the front of the ink pad is where the notch is. That's where you would open it up. And we're just going to take this sticky label and we're just going to place it right underneath that space that's right underneath that notch right there, okay? That way, when your ink pad is sitting on a shelf like this, and you're looking at it from this direction right here, you can see the color of the ink pad right there on the side. Okay, now, you can do a lot of different things with these other ones. Some people use a different language, and they put it here on this other end. And here comes my dog coughing like he always does in the middle of my Facebook Lives. I don't know why that is. Hopefully you can't hear him. You can place it here on the other side. You just don't want to go over that seam where the ink pad opens up. And then you just, even though you can't read the language, you can at least see the color of the ink pad right there. Now, you see that there's one here that has no writing on it at all. And I'm going to show you what you can do with that one. If you open your ink pad, and I'll give you some tutorials on that in just a second, there is this little notch right here. Now, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes I struggle to get this in that little notch. So what I've learned to do is I just press it down a little bit. Sorry about my dog. You guys are used to that by now. Just put it in that notch right there. Just let it fall. And then I take your pick tool and I just kind of press it in with that spatula attachment on my take your pick tool right there. Now you could also put that blank one here on the edge right here, and then you wouldn't have to worry about fitting it space, but that's what that space right there was designed for, is to put that other color of a label right there. Hi Roberta, thanks for joining me today. All right, so when you first get your ink pads, they're going to be a little bit harder to open, okay? So what I tell my customers is hold the ink pad in your non-dominant hand and lift this up, put your thumb on where that notch is right there, and lift it up like a compact, like you were going to look at yourself in the mirror, okay? And then flip it all the way over and push it in. When you're closing it, people struggle with getting ink all over their fingers. I never touch the top of my ink pad. I use my thumb here and just press it a little bit. Grab this lip right here where the color is with my fingernails. Pull. You'll kind of hear it click a little bit. Click into place. Pull it as far as you can. And then flip it over and you'll hear it clasp shut. That takes some practice, so let's do it again. We're going to open it. Hi, Lori Kemp. Like a compact, okay? Like you're looking at yourself in the mirror there, and they're going to flip it all the way over. You're going to press it in until it clicks. You'll hear a slight click. Then put your fingernails right where that lip is right there. Pull it all the way out. If you don't pull it all the way out, you're going to break the hinge on it, okay? I've had that happen to customers. So pull it all the way out. Use your nails right there on that lip, and then flip it over, and you want to make sure it clicks shut, okay? So that is how to put the label on your ink pad so that you can see the color from this side. You could even put one on this other side, even though it's in a different language, and put one on the inside so when your stamp pad is open, you're going to know that this is your fresh freesia and this is your summer splash, okay? I haven't put my little strip label in there, but it's a good, if you're just grabbing ink pads really quick, it's nice to have that other color on the inside there, okay? So, pull and flip, pull and flip, press it down so it clicks, and you can see I don't have any ink on my fingers at all, okay? Now, these ink pads are water-based, okay? If you're using ink pads, but you want some black on it as well, you're gonna wanna use, if you're using our colored ink pads, you're gonna use our black ink that is called Stayson Ink. Stayson is a solvent ink pad. It's archival safe, as is all of our ink pads. So that means if you're using these for scrapbooking, if you're making a card that you want to last for years and years, the color is going to stay better. It doesn't have the acid in it that's going to break down the paper or the ink or anything like that. They're all archival safe. Okay, so Stayson Ink is one that I honestly don't use a whole lot. Because I don't do a lot of coloring with markers anymore now that I have my blends, but maybe you guys like to color with markers. So if you're coloring with markers, our markers and our colored ink pads, these are our markers right here. Just like our blends, they have a brush end and a bullet tip end. If you're coloring with markers, you want to use a Stayson ink pad. Okay, so I've got a zinnia right here. And the reason you want to use Stayson is because Stayson will not bleed when it comes in contact with water-based inks. Okay, so I'm going to ink this up, this zinnia, up with my Stayson ink pad. It's a permanent solvent ink pad. There we go. Nice, beautiful black. We also have Stayson inks in brown as well. And then, let me put the lid back on there before I get things all over it here. If we were coloring with a marker, the Stayson is not going to bleed. Okay, the Stayson is water solvent, so it is not going to bleed, and you're going to still get that crisp black color underneath your petals there, okay? Okay, now, if I were to take one of my alcohol-based blends and try to color it, I think we're going to see that it is going to, I haven't even opened these up yet, it is going to bleed some. Okay, so can you see that? Do you see how the black bled and it looks a little blotchy, but over here it doesn't? It stayed crisp, but over here you can see that the pink is starting to turn, oops, let me get a little more back here, starting to turn a little bit black. That's because I'm trying to use an alcohol-based marker on an ink that is only water solvent. So regular markers work great with this ink, but the alcohol markers do not work great with this ink, okay? Now, so that is our Stayson. Another thing that Stayson is great for is if you want to stamp on something like glitter paper or vellum, that usually if you stamp in our other ink, it's going to run, okay? So if I took my Stayson ink and I just wanted to stamp maybe a background, I just didn't get that inked up very well there, on glitter paper like that, if I tried to do this with Memento black ink or one of our colored inks, it would run. But you can tell it's staying, it's not rubbing off, and it is staying perfect, okay? So Stayson is great for that. Stayson ink is also great if you wanted to stamp on vellum. Oh, Judy, here, let me put that. I dropped it. There you go. If you wanted to stamp on vellum, you can see I get a really crisp black image, and I might let this set for just like 20 or 30 seconds, and then it would not wipe off. It would stay on there, okay? So that's when you use Stayson Ink. You use it if you need to stamp black on a surface that normally would bleed, like glitter paper or vellum, and if you're using our water-based markers, or if you wanted to like sponge daub ink onto the flower, you would want to use Stayson Ink because you don't want that color to run, okay? All right, so I'm gonna put this aside for just a second. The next kind of ink I wanna talk about is our Memento Black ink. And I'm gonna tell you, this is the ink that I use the most often, okay? I love Memento Black ink. It has multiple uses. I use it for sentiments and more than any other black ink pad. I just really like how it inks up. Now, the nice thing about Memento Black ink is it's also archival safe, acid free, right? And it is what we need to use. Beautiful, right? If we're gonna use our blends, if you're coloring with blends, Memento Black ink is the ink that you wanna use because it is not going to run when you use your alcohol-based inks. Like you can see here, it started looking a little blotchy and black, right? So, I'm gonna pull out my blends here, and when I color this ink, I'm not going to get that blotchy black look that I had with the Stayson ink because Memento Black ink is formulated to be resistant to alcohol-based markers and ink, okay? So I'm going to grab my dark color like I would if I was blending. The nice thing about blends is that you can add contrasting colors, and because they're alcohol-based, it's going to give a really beautiful dimension to the color. It's not going to be quite as flat as this is right here. You can see that this, because I'm using the alcohol-based markers, has more dimension and contrast to the color that I'm using there, okay? So, Memento Black is your go-to black for most things. If you try to stamp in Memento Black on vellum or on glitter paper, it is not going to dry permanent like the Stayson ink will, okay? So our two blacks are Stayson and Memento. You're going to use Memento for most things like sentiments and things like that, but especially if you're using the blends. You're going to use Stayson ink if you need a permanent black ink, stamping on vellum or glitter or fabric even, and you will use it whenever you're watercoloring or using markers or using our dye ink pads to brush on or something like that, okay? So that's the difference between the two blacks. Any questions about that, you can ask me in the chat here, or you can PM me at some time, and I will get back to you on the answers on that, okay? So I'm gonna clean these off really quick. And because the Stayson is so permanent, it is going to stay on your ink pads a little bit more. There is a special Stayson cleaner. I haven't had to use it, but it'll do a better job at getting all the ink off. But that ink is not going to ever transfer if you are trying to stamp in with another ink color, okay? All right, so the last type of ink I want to talk to you guys about is called our Versamark ink, okay? Versamark ink is a clear ink. And it has two purposes. So I'm going to show you right here. One purpose of a Versamark ink is to just give kind of a tone-on-tone, subtle tone-on-tone color to your stamping. Okay, so it's a clear ink. It is sticky, and we're going to talk about why it's sticky in a minute. But if I were to stamp this clear ink on this crumb cake, it's kind of hard to tell, but you can see, I can see it from my end. I wonder if you guys can see it on you. It gives a very subtle, almost kind of watermark effect to the paper. So, and it, as it dries, it gets even a little more distinctive. Can you guys see that? Yeah, so it's very subtle. If you just want a little texture to your background, it's just going to give a little texture, and that'll dry. And as it dries, it does get a tiny bit darker as it dries. Okay, so the other thing, though, that's cool about Versamark ink is it's what you use if you are heat embossing. So you could leave that right like that, or I've got my gold embossing powder here. Versamark is what you want to use if you are heat embossing. So you get your embossing powder. And I might have, oh, I didn't, good. I thought I might have waited a little too long for the stickiness to still be there, but it looks like it's there. You pour the embossing powder on that sticky Versamark ink, and it's gonna stick to where the Versamark is. Okay, do you see that? Then, I think heat embossing is so cool. Okay, so this is gold embossing powder. I have that labeled there. You grab your embossing gun, and because that powder, let me get rid of this powder that's right there. Let me get rid of that. Okay, because it's stuck to that powder, I'm going to get my embossing gun. This is just a very concentrated heat gun. Back when I started stamping, which was probably 90s, sometime in the early 90s, they used to tell us to heat up our embossing powder over our oven burner, which never worked out very well. Then they came out with these embossing guns. So this is like a blow dryer, but very concentrated and hot air. And you're just gonna kind of hold, I know it's loud, but I'm gonna hold this at an angle because I want you to be able to see that when you heat up this powder on this vellum, it's going to turn into gold. You can see it turning there on that flower. It'll change from a dull finish to a shiny finish. Pull this one over here. Okay, let me get that little edge right there. All right, so I'm going to show you the difference. So sometimes early on, customers kind of have a hard time telling if it's embossed or not. Now let you take a look at this, and I don't know, you might have a hard time. There you go. Can you see how this right here is shiny and it's raised, and this right here is still dull? You don't have any shine on this side, okay? So the Versamark is sticky enough that it holds the embossing powder, and it allows you to heat emboss and turn that powder into gold, okay? So if you wanted a background of subtle flowers, you would just stamp with the Versamark ink and not heat emboss it. Just let it dry for just a second. If you want a really cool gold embossed background or sentiment or anything like that, you would want to add embossing powder and heat emboss to create that gold finish on the cardstock, okay? So there you go. What do you guys think of all of that? Isn't that fun? So let's go back over. Versamark is if you want a watermark type effect on your cardstock, or you want to use embossing powders and heat emboss. The Stayson Ink is when you're doing watercoloring or you're going to color or stamp on a surface that normally wouldn't hold the ink very well because it's very permanent. Memento black ink is especially when you're using the blends. And then we have 60 plus colors of our beautiful dye inks that just make gorgeous stamped images for any occasion. This one is one of our new ink colors, Summer Splash, and this is a fresh freesia that I just bought an extra new one for because a customer broke my ink pad in a class, which is, you know, it's part of the learning curve. So I just needed a new fresh freesia ink. So if you have any questions about inks, hi Teresa, you might need to watch again because I'm almost done. Any questions about any of these inks or when to use them, I would be happy to answer your questions for you. I would love your feedback on how you like the Tuttle Thursday tip. I plan on doing these every Thursday afternoon until I just don't think people are interested anymore. So I hope that's never. So if you also have things that you would like me to talk about, submit them to me through a private message or email them to me, and I would be happy to give that some consideration. Next week, I'm going to talk about, because a lot of customers have asked me about that, how to get the stickers just right on your red rubber ink pads, to the cling sticker so that they're just right. So I'm going to show you how I do that next Thursday. So God bless everybody. Thanks for joining me today. And I hope this is something that becomes a great tradition. Bye-bye.